As the Money Burns is an original podcast by Nikki Woodard. Based on historical research, this is a deep exploration into what happened to a set of actual heirs and heiresses to some of America's most famous fortunes when the Great Depression hits. Each episode has 3 primary sections. Section 1 is a narrative story. Section 2 goes deeper into the historical facts. Section 3 focuses on contemporary, emotional, and personal connections. Story recap. Rejected by Barbara Hutton, rumors hint the newly divorced Prince Alexis Mdivani might be romancing Doris Duke or even Louise Van Alen. Now back to As the Money Burns. Double harness. The heart wants what it wants, so a concerned mother rushes to thwart her heiress daughter's return to her former love. Section 1. Story. A mother's work is never done when fortune hunters are on the prowl. A divorce might be considered scandalous and still be very much desired, only to face the same problem all over again when the next love comes knocking. Back in November 1932, It Girl heiress Louise Van Alen bade farewell to her princess title and longtime love, the ruggedly handsome Russian Prince Alexis Mdivani. That summer he had been caught in bed with chubby budding fashionista, heiress Barbara Hutton, at the Spanish estate of his sister, Princess Rusidana Rusi Mdivani. Louise left heartbroken and finally relented to giving him a divorce and a nice $1 million settlement that would be $23.8 million in 2024. Shortly after their divorce in Holland, the prince headed off to New York to secure Barbara, while Louise remains in France and close to Rusi. When Alexis returns to France after his failed adventure, the person meeting him at the boat train depot is none other than Louise, greeting him with open arms. They will be seen dining and interacting around Paris. While the situation in Spain remains under wraps for now, the newspapers report on the prince and Louise's whereabouts. Back in the United States at the Wakehurst cottage in Newport, Rhode Island, her mother, socialite queen Daisy Van Alen, grows concerned about her daughter's mental state. Alexis had been a longtime friend of the Van Alen family, having befriended brothers James Henry Van Alen and William Sam Van Alen back at Eton. The impoverished Alexis lived well off the family and took the "What's ours is yours" motto to the extent of their younger sister. Upon discovery of Alexis and Louise sneaking around, the family had a big fight. The family was most unhappy with this arrangement. However, the strong-willed Louise insisted on remaining with Alexis and marrying him in a small ceremony at Wakehurst. After leaving for their honeymoon, Louise has resided primarily in Paris, though she quickly grew weary of the endless and excessive partying of the prince's circle, the Lost Midnight Brigade. While he enjoyed the lavish spending, it would be less than 18 months of marriage when he is caught in between the sheets with the much larger heiress, Barbara. One would hope Louise, now free, would leave. But no, she remains enamored with the Mdivani clan. The mesmerizing and enchanting Rusi is as adept at sculpting minds to her whim as she is in her art. Newspapers report Louise will join Rusi and her husband, Spanish painter Josep Maria Sert, when they travel back to New York in April 1933 to unveil his next set of murals for the newly opened Radio City Music Hall in Rockefeller Center. Whispers abound that Louise might be reuniting with the prince and may indeed double harness herself to him for another marriage. Thursday, March 30th, 1933, the Atlantic Ocean. Incensed, the overly concerned Daisy sails aboard the Bremen ocean liner to Paris. She will do her best to bring her daughter home, or at least persuade her against a second union. Upon Daisy's arrival, she finds Louise distraught and upset. Why, oh why, will Louise not give up her ongoing association with the Mdivanis? Quickly, Daisy's concerns turns to relief when she discovers Prince Alexis is planning to go abroad for some journalistic endeavor. With pencil, paper, and binoculars, Alexis claims he needs to report on the Sino-Japanese trouble. Sayonara and good riddance is all Daisy thinks. only she forgets to check on all of Louise's finances post-divorce, like about a certain joint bank account that has yet to be closed. It seems Prince Alexis has abandoned Louise again in pursuit of a grander fortune. Meanwhile, Barbara continues her venture in the South Seas, traveling on to Java for more jade shopping, visiting the sites, and trying to mend her broken heart, all the while evading the endless engagement speculations. Another parent should have been more vigilant. Grown children with massive fortunes might always require some form of supervision. 1 week into the future, April 1933, somewhere in the world. An heiress steps off a boat onto land while a fortune hunter lands by air. Stepping out from the airport is none other than to be continued. Section 2, History and Historiography. This tale has been a long winding road that gets even twistier the more up close and personal we get to it. When I first conceived of telling the story, I must admit I had no idea I would be uncovering the micro details I am now revealing to you. I set up a format of telling the story close to a chronological time to pace out the story, with knowable blanks and spaces, but with the trust that they would fill out as time goes on. Of course, I'm a crazy and thorough researcher, so those blank spaces get filled up and at times even a bit bloated. But I am taking immense pleasure in all this discovery. Why? Because exactly that, the why. Why do things happen? It's the perpetual question we always ask ourselves. In the court of law, motive is a big determining factor as to what is determined as a crime and what type of punishment should be meted out. In the court of public opinion, on less judicial matters like things based on feelings and emotions, the why, the motivation, very much matters. It can be the hardest to ascertain whether truth and perception and or reality, and more likely a mixture between the two. For motivation can be highly complex and very multidimensional. When it comes to betrayal, it's the layers that count, the subtle piece upon piece that builds up and leads to more. When we read an event in a biography, we have little reference to space and time in which it is happening. Was it a one instance or a series of progression of little things? Generally, it can be safe to assume the latter, rather than one big explosion. But when it is taken as solely one thing, it's hard to understand the reactions. These little tidbits of details add so much to the story, and even more, counter the known story. Barbara Hutton in her statements often claimed Louise Van Alen had little interest in Prince Alexis Mdivani. These recent gossip snippets prove otherwise. Another important aspect is making tangible connections. The fact that everyone seems to be traveling on the same ocean liners and to the same locations back and forth. Travel lasted more than today's mostly half-a-day flight to almost anywhere, but back then travel took several days, if not a week or more, crossing the Atlantic Ocean or to other destinations. Time in between to move about and socialize, or at a minimum, observe a fellow passenger. All this makes the world feel more insular and familiar. This is a different environment and community, not as isolationist as we tend to think when looking into the past. So much when we look and dissect an event or a person, it is very hyper-focused and in a way that ignores the other surrounding elements and influences. Yes, the media is covered, but what is an era really like? What are the prominent theories, ideologies, and interactions that dictate life choices in the subconscious? Yes, we know items and details separately, but what if we put them back next to each other? Really next to each other. Actively next to each other. Often these discoveries come as I pursue confirmation of a date, chronology, and who else might be present as a witness or a participant. And now, such luscious details are adding more dimension and intrigue to the story. I had no idea, and certainly not even this far into the project, that I would be uncovering so many of these tiny details that so illuminate more to these situations, adding layer and texture to things still yet to come. Not only am I telling the story in a different way, but I'm getting to reveal new information. A real story, the actual story. Not fiction, but real stories of love, fortune, and heartbreak. Love is a matter of perception, so even rumors, lies, and misdirection are part of the experience. Once again, I emphasize part of this ability to locate this information is due to our current era. The digital internet resources and the ability to use technology to peruse and browse these elements across multiple sources. I would not fault the past biographers from almost 40 years ago or more for not manually scouring every newspaper to check for these minuscule variants and tidbits. I need such information because of the method and manner with which I am telling multiple people's stories. Covering so many people expands what I am searching for and increases the pleasure when finding the intersections and overlaps between them. And since I'm telling their stories over an extended and focused time frame, that allows for the savoring and ability to segue and digress onto the smaller paths. It helps connect the time in between bigger events with the emotional thread and the effects of time to intensify or de-escalate a situation or feelings. I don't need to rush to the next part in trying to cover succinctly a 70-plus years lifetime and multiple relationships of one person's life. But knowing that other information, I can point out similar and recurring themes in earlier interactions, knowing what they really foreshadow. This new information turns speculation and insinuation into something more concrete. A seduction, a pursuit, not in mere illusion, but with actual dates and tiny events that seem irrelevant in the present, but in the near future could retrospectively reveal a very powerful chess move. The story being rewoven is in the present, the near future, a further future, and even as far into the future, well past their own lives. The final move in one game of fortune and love will soon come into play. Will a prince turn into a king? Or will someone else take away his queen? Section 3, Contemporary and Personal Relevance. As mentioned, the story I'm telling has never been told this way before. We have only been told the story from one side, Barbara Hutton's. There are several reasons for this, and some I can't explicitly say at this moment without ruining the story with spoilers for those who want to just listen to this particular podcast for their information. Though any quick internet search would reveal a few key elements, there would be a tremendous amount of research to reconnect the dots that I'm connecting within this particular world. I'm not interested in just telling a story. I'm interested in a whole world, and very much so in how humans are always first and foremost human. And what is more human than lust, greed, and envy? The deadly sins I find most compelling. Those deadly sins are not just deadly to the harborer, but to the person personifying those desires. Sex, beauty, money, popularity. What is more important than the relationships we have with our family, friends, and those in close proximity, either neighbors or coworkers of a sort, employees and staff included? The most compelling part of this story and hook for me has always been this intricate set of betrayals, and the heights to which some of them exceed and the pits of their downfall afterwards. In my early research, only one source pointed out the real history of the Van Alens with Prince Alexis Mdivani. Other sources will remark on the prince and Barbara's prior history, or should I say, gloss over. Now I see a little more in the contemporary news articles back then, but it is still not the full-fledged background given in that original source. And now I'm finding other pieces of information that extends beyond the information reported in that initial source. For me, it is interesting, this extra information that so fleshes out other sides of the story. But what I'm finding are tiny pieces. I was discussing this with my lifelong best friend while trying to sort out this episode's difficulties in tracking down these random pieces and putting them back together, as well as determining what is scandal, rumor, or whatever else might be true. She quipped an observation similar to what I had recently mentioned before in this podcast. She was like, it's going to be even harder when people look back at this moment in our lives and know what's true and not. The contrast of people overexposing themselves with social media. Now we have such an abundance of information, and with the evolution of AI, artificial intelligence, and creating things, it's going to get near impossible to sort out what is real and not. On that note, for my last upload, YouTube now has a policy where content creators have to declare if they use any material, sound, or still, or moving images that has been altered in any manner and therefore not in fact real. That means like modifying a photo as in changing places or people and therefore context, replicating voices for things that were not recorded, or animating a photo or creating any form of realistic footage, but that is not actual footage. This won't always be as simple to spot as the recent uproar over the poorly created altar photo of Catherine, Princess of Wales, and her children. She is a well-beloved international figure, but reactions can come from anywhere and not nearly as well-meaning. A perfect example as to how over-fascination with particular people and the demand for content will one way or another lead to these other things getting created. Back during the Great Depression, the public was eyeing our heirs and heiresses, and the press was documenting their adventures and misadventures. A game of sport for some, but the targets might not quite feel the same amusement. Well, guess what? It has been 4 years since I released my first episode of this podcast. It has been a slow and steady work of heart. Last year, I definitely faced and still face an ongoing technical challenge as well as drastic change in personal circumstances. This podcast still remains something deeply driving me, and I have nearly as many episodes to go before completing these stories. I hope you keep listening and look forward to hearing your experiences or answering any further questions. I have gotten some interesting notes and requests recently that I will continue to share as they fit our different episodes and themes. If you enjoy As the Money Burns, then please share, like, and subscribe. Next, when we return to As the Money Burns, a fortune hunter makes the final play to capture his main prize, but his final move might involve his recently discarded former prey. Until then, As the Money Burns is an original podcast written, produced, and voiced by Nikki Woodard, based on historical research. Archival music has been provided by Past Perfect Vintage Music. Check out their website at www.pastperfect.com. Please come visit us at As the Money Burns via GoodPods X, formerly Twitter, Facebook, now Meta, or Instagram. Transcripts, timeline, episode guide, and character bios are available at asthemoneyburns.com.